And now any any expression of like a cross-gender preference by a child is immediately, at least in my town, immediately sort of seized upon, and they're like,
Mm.
"Oh, wow, that means that you're trans, and so we're going to give you a new name. You can pick out the name, and we'll bring you to kindergarten and say that you're a girl, and these are your pronouns." And it's all like fun and games when you're in kindergarten,
Mhm.
but you are setting that kid up for a really difficult road.
Hey everybody. Oh my gosh, today I caught another one, but an amazing one. I'm speechless, to be honest with you. Like, I can't even believe that this person said yes to me when I asked for an interview. So, first, before I go out, subscribe, like, do all those crazy things you do, because my channel is really getting the likes, and really people are seeing what we're doing here. And again, I say I believe this as a community channel, and bringing super important people to this is just everything I've ever dreamed of in this insane world we live in today. And I just want people to see that not all of us are spinning around in a circle, and we care about what's happening here. And so today I have this amazing guest, Dr. Julia Mason, and I'm going to have her introduce herself, and then we'll move forward there. So, hi, Dr. Julia, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing okay. Let's see. My name's Julia Mason. I've been a pediatrician for almost 30 years. And I went to the University of Illinois Medical School, and then I did my residency at Children's Hospital Los Angeles.
Mm,
But that was a long time ago.
mm,
That was in the 90s.
mhm.
And I've been practicing as a pediatrician for a long, long time. And
Right.
now I live in Portland, Oregon, and I practice pediatrics in Gresham, Oregon, which is right next to Portland.
Okay. Wow, well, first off, wow, that's amazing you have so much time under your belt. That's why I really admire you. I watch you all the time, and I just really feel so lucky to have a person like you speaking out, because we live in such a crazy time where we can't say certain, and me as a transsexual man, right? I transitioned 30 years ago. When you were going to school,
Right?
I was transitioning. So so that being said, you
They
know,
did not tell me about you at that time.
it's crazy like that we're sitting here together today and gonna have this kind of very important conversation. And so I kind of find it kind of funny to me that you worked at the LA Children's Hospital, which
Mhm.
I'm not happy with, and I don't know
Yeah.
how you feel about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an issue. It's not they're not doing what I would like them to do, but I have no say over what they do over there.
That's right. So,
Yeah.
for the listeners out there, I want to let you know that. Well, actually, I'm going to ask you, Doctor
Okay.
Julia. So, what do you think about this transitioning of children?
Well, I'm worried about it because when I was training 30 years ago, I was told that this was a thing, but it was a
Mhm,
thing that was found in like 2 out of 10,000. It was exceptionally rare,
mhm,
and it was like 2/3, boys, natal
mhm.
boys
Right.
who, I would say when they expressed a desire to wear the skirt or play with the doll or whatever, and then they're told, "No, you can't have that.
Mhm,
Why can't I have that? Because that's for girls."
mhm.
Then the boy says, "Well, then I'm a girl." I mean, it's totally reasonable 4-year-old logic.
Yeah.
And so the majority of cases were boys like that. And then as they hit puberty, the majority of those boys figured out they were gay and they just got on with their lives.
Yeah.
But somehow in the past, say 8 to 10 years, everything has changed around that. And now any any expression of like a cross-gender preference by a child is immediately, at least in my town, immediately sort of seized upon, and they're like,
Mm.
"Oh, wow, that means that you're trans, and so we're going to give you a new name. You can pick out the name, and we'll bring you to kindergarten and say that you're a girl, and these are your pronouns." And it's all like fun and games when you're in kindergarten,
Mhm.
but you are setting that kid up for a really difficult road. I mean, it's a hard road. It's
Ugh,
not a thing to undertake lightly.
no.
And
I
yet that seems to be what's happening now. It just seems to be like everybody, if anybody has any tendency that way, it's like, okay, well, here we go. And then
it's
we'll do the puberty blockers, and then we'll do the cross sex hormones, and then we'll do the surgeries.
I mean, I don't know how you feel as a doctor, but me as an actual transsexual who, I didn't transition until I was in my 30s, and I
Hmm.
lived a full life prior to that. I would say that, of course I struggled, my friend. You probably struggled. I think
Hmm.
we all struggled on some sense, right? But that being s oh, hey, dog.
Yeah, that's
That's
the
all good.
postman.
I got him
That's,
too. But that
yeah.
being said, I it's just bizarre to me that we would take a child at face value that way because it wants to wear she or he wants to wear different clothing or play with a different toy or and you just said it. Most of them
Hmm.
sort of grew out of it and went on to most of the time be gay. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
usually that's usually what happened.
Yeah.
And so I guess my personal opinion is that trans is something you do, it's not something you are. And to
Right.
decide to transition is a really serious decision, and I think it's an adult decision.
Right on.
I don't think that kids can give informed consent for something like this. And the way they've always been setting it up is they're like, do you want a live daughter or a dead son? And they keep threatening everybody with suicide, but there's no evidence at all. Nada. There
Thank
is
you.
no evidence that if you do not transition a kid that they are more likely to kill themselves.
Wow.
There was just a big paper published in the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the
Mhm,
top medical journals. It's Chen et al. 2023, came out in January. And this was the first paper out of this big NIH funded study
mhm,
at what's supposed to be the top gender clinics in the country,
mhm,
including at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, my alma mater. And they're showing, well, because it was an NIH study, they had to say what they were gonna measure before they got the money,
mhm.
and they listed 8 things they were gonna keep track of. And then they published in January, and they reported on 2 out of those 8 things. 6 of the 8 things they said they were gonna keep track of, they didn't report. And then they said
Mm.
that the most common, adverse effect of the gender affirming care was ideation, and 2 out of 315 patients enrolled in this study died by their own hand, which is it's a terrible suicide rate. It's like 50 times the background rate for kids of this age group.
Wow.
And so what I've always said is, the suicide rate for kids who identify as trans is higher than background, but
Mhm,
it's on par with kids who have depression or OCD or
mhm.
anxiety or other issues like that. And most of these kids have those other
Yeah,
mental health conditions. And
right.
so you really can't even say that it's the trans that puts them in danger. Michael
Fascinating.
Biggs is a sociologist at Oxford, and he did a Freedom of Information Act
Mhm,
inquiry to the Tavistock, which is the world's largest gender clinic for
mhm,
kids.
mhm,
And in over 10 years, I believe it was 14,000 patients,
mhm.
there were 4 kids, and 2 of them were kids that were being treated, and 2 of them were kids that were on the waiting list.
Wow.
So there wasn't like, I mean, the numbers are too small to really say anything with confidence, but you can say there's
Sure.
no apparent difference. There's no
No.
obvious difference
Yeah.
between treated and not treated. And the way the Tavistock worked, one of the reasons it was shut down is sort of like as soon as gender came up, a local doctor would be like, "Right, you're going to the gender clinic," and they just like, write you off, and then you might spend a couple years with nothing,
Right.
no support, no counseling, no, you're just waiting. People just waited. And so those kids, the 2 on the waiting list and the 2 getting treatment were having very different experiences, but it was
Sure.
about the same numbers.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, that says a lot.
Yeah. But so they've always been bringing up suicide as the specter
That's
to
right.
justify the really serious side effects of these treatments. Puberty blockers have serious side effects. And, I was just listening to Hannah Barnes, who wrote a book about the Tavistock, and she was talking about a a young woman. Well, no, she still identifies as trans. So a young trans man who
Mhm,
was on, puberty blockers for 4 years and had 4 broken bones during this time, and decided not to go on testosterone, still identifies as trans, but decided not to go on testosterone, withdrew from the puberty blockers, and it took 2 years to have a period, and still isn't having regular periods, and
mhm,
still feels like he hasn't matured like his friends, like his
mhm.
brain hasn't developed, and has never had a crush on anybody, has never kissed anybody. And there was another, detransitioner I met in Ireland who had the same description of just losing all sort of inner spark, all sort of inner
Oh
sexual feelings for anything
my
while they were
god.
being treated with the puberty blockers. So the puberty blockers are super powerful. It's what they use to chemically castrate sex offenders. They were developed for prostate cancer
Mm,
because you could have a prostate cancer that's sensitive to the sex hormones. So if you wipe them all out, then your cancer doesn't grow. There's some
mhm,
breast cancers that are like that too.
mhm,
But like it's been used for endometriosis, but it's got a ton of side effects and it's recommended you don't do it for more than 6 months.
mhm,
And it is used on kids for precocious puberty. But what I wanna emphasize is when I checked Up to Date, which is sort of a big online medical textbook,
mhm.
about 4 years ago, they were the experts that were writing the chapter on precocious puberty said, "We only recommend using Lupron," using a puberty blocker on a girl who is 5 or 6.
Wow.
And then you use it for 2 years and you
Mhm,
take it out, and then you allow the puberty to
mhm,
resume.
mhm,
And so the normal range of first period is 9 to
mhm,
17. There's a huge range of normal for first period in girls.
mhm,
And so if you do it from 5 to 7, then they might have their first period when they're 8, but they were like, "You know what? Given the side effects, that's the way to go." Like,
right.
don't. And so you'll often hear, in fact, I heard Hannah in this interview talk about, "Oh, precocious puberty, they only use that on kids that are 7 or 8." And I'm like, "No. No,
Mhm,
not 7 or 8." I mean, it
mhm,
has been done, but there's been like a class action lawsuit from people
mhm.
who were treated for precocious puberty and had issues with their bones, broken
Wow.
bones, teeth falling out,
Oh my
things like
god.
that. So the puberty blockers are serious, strong
Mm,
medicine. And the idea of putting a 12-year-old girl on who's already started her periods, putting her on a puberty blocker, you're just going to put her into menopause immediately.
wow.
And the menopause is gonna happen super fast. I don't know how fast, but, like less than a month, boom, all of it. And, that was rough on me, right? Like, I didn't enjoy that, and
I
that
had
took
it
a
too.
while. Yeah, you had it in your 30s. But, it's really intense when it's done via puberty blockers. So, I don't think there's any call for puberty blockers in being given to kids for gender issues. I just think there's too many side effects.
And also, well, thank you so much for that because this
Mhm.
is so like golden. Because people, when I say it, people are like, "That's not true." I'm like, I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm nothing
Mhm.
medical. I know nothing. I just live in life, and I've gone through puberty. I went through
Right?
female puberty, by the way. Look at
Yeah.
me. I mean, you can
Mhm.
actually transition and have a great life. With that being said, so bones
Mhm.
are one of the side
Brain.
effects. Brain.
Mhm.
What else? Are there other kinds of
Oh, well, I mean, just all the symptoms of
menopausal?
menopause, and
Yeah.
then there's, it's not strong evidence, but it really seems like the rate of depression goes up
Oh,
when somebody's on puberty blockers,
makes sense.
and I
Makes a
do
lot of
think it sort
sense.
of removes the spark, yeah,
But then
from
we're
their.
now I wanna go back to
Mhm.
the sexual. space, right? I'm very pro sex. I think it's very adult, clearly.
Mhm.
I think it's very important for health. It really helps me move forward in the world to, really connect to my body sexually and and feel comfortable in myself. And I do think,
Mhm.
it's important that people at least get the opportunity to
Right.
have that choice. And when you do these kind of things, you're not giving this little
No,
person.
you're just it's like yeah, you're
Wow,
valuing appearance over function.
that's what I
That
always say.
that's what happens is it's like for the sake of a more congruent appearance, you're losing function. I mean,
Wow.
I'm sure you've seen the video of Marcy Bowers, the trans woman who is a surgeon who
Yep.
did Jazz Jennings'
Yep.
vaginoplasty, or at least one of them.
Yep.
Jazz had multiple surgeries,
Wow.
and was saying it was like a Zoom meeting during the pandemic, so
Mhm.
it's all the little squares, it looks like the Brady Bunch,
Yeah.
and it's all doctors, and they think they're just talking to each other, but somebody got the tape.
Mm,
And Marcy Bowers says, of my natal males who were blocked right at the start of puberty, like the first pubic hair, like, oh,
mhm.
there's puberty, better block it. Um, None of them have been able to achieve orgasm.
Oh, that is
And
actually
that's
so
just yeah,
it's depressing.
it is depressing.
I
Because the
mean,
thing is when you're a child and you've been reading about this and you've been watching videos of influencers and you
yeah,
know what you want and you want it very much and you want
yeah.
it badly, then a child of 12 or 14 will say like, well, I don't plan on having kids.
Mhm.
I never wanted to have kids. Or they're like, orgasms sound gross.
Oh my
Nah.
god.
You know what I mean? Like you cannot sign away your right to a thing that you have no idea what it is.
I mean, come on, we all know that. Every single one of us on this planet was a child at some time. That's the thing that I always say. We've all been a child. Think about when
Yeah.
you were 10 and think about yourself now and think about, and I also want to say, I am a parent, by the way, and I never
Mm,
wanted to be a parent. And now at
mm,
60, I am a parent. I got a kid 5 or 6 years ago, right? But that being
mhm.
said, my God, it's changed my life for so incredible.
Wow.
But as a child, as a young person, I didn't want children. Gross. That's exactly what I said. So how
Yeah,
dare we take that opportunity
right. I mean,
away from them?
traditionally, if a young woman went to a gynecologist
Yeah.
and said, "I want to be sterilized," like, "I hate kids,
Mhm,
I'm never gonna have kids, and
mhm,
birth control's a pain, and they all have side effects, and I don't want any of it, and I'd just like to have a hysterectomy." I mean, they
mhm,
developed these guidelines when they didn't have good tube tying things, but,
mhm,
I just want it out. They were like, "No," and they're like, "Absolutely not. Not until you're at least 35 or you've had 2 kids." And in the old days, it was like, "And with your husband's permission," because it was all very patriarchal.
Yeah.
But I was told the reason they did that is because about 30% of young women who were surgically sterilized would later, you know, get a new boyfriend, whatever,
Mhm,
like get in a new
mhm,
situation and regret the
mhm,
loss of their fertility. And you could not tell which 3 out of 10 it was gonna be. So
mhm.
70%, more than half, more than 2/3 of the women who said, "I never wanna have kids," they were right. They never
Wow.
wanna have kids, they were right, but because you can't tell which ones it is,
Mhm.
the doctors were like, "No, we're not doing it because I don't wanna deal with that," I don't wanna deal with that unhappy patient.
Right. Right. S
And, that's definitely a thing, you're looking around at your life and you're like, "I couldn't
Yeah.
possibly have kids," and then you get involved and suddenly you want nothing
Yep.
more.
I mean,
And then
I want to adopt more.
you
I'm
wanna
like,
adopt
"I
some
need more
more.
kids. This is amazing." I'm super dad. Yay.
Awesome, that's
It's
awesome.
awesome. I'm telling you,
Yeah,
it's, like, seriously changed so much of
you
my
can't
life.
talk to
It
Jamie Reed. She has, like, 5
Love
kids.
Jamie. I'm totally connected to Jamie. She's
Yeah,
amazing.
she's amazing.
We're all coming together around this, and I just feel such a powerful space. And that being said, why do you think this puberty blocking thing happened? Do you have
Well,
any?
it
Uh-huh.
happened because the Dutch are an interesting people. I
Yeah.
visited there in the '80s,
Yeah.
and they're very practical, and they value progressiveness a
Mhm.
lot.
Mhm.
And so in the 80s, that was like the only place in the world where you could smoke marijuana, like
Yeah.
marijuana
Right.
was legal and hashish was legal, and you could go to a bakery and get like
Right.
hash brownies. And very exciting as a young college student to go to
Totally.
Amsterdam, right? It's Amsterdam, and you're like, oh wow, and then you just get really sleepy, but whatever. So, and my uncle actually, um, my mom's brother was a professional musician, and he moved
Mm.
to Amsterdam, and he stayed there because he was gay.
Mhm.
And Amsterdam was sort of the San Francisco of Europe. It was just so much more open-minded, and he had a really good life there.
Mhm.
So that went really well for him, much better than he would have done in Texas.
Oh god.
So the Dutch are very progressive, and so they'd been very open to the idea of transsexuals and doing surgery, all that kind of stuff. But
Right.
they're like, our transsexuals are not that happy, especially the male to female,
Mhm.
because they've been through puberty, and so they've got the deep voice, and you can't fix that.
Mhm.
And they've got they've got all the things that testosterone does to you, right? And so they're like, maybe if we did this sooner, or maybe if we were able to block puberty, then
Mhm.
they'd be happier. Ironically, the first patient that was given puberty blockers as sort of an experiment was a natal female. Was a
Wow.
natal female with who was very butch and who had very conservative parents,
Mhm.
and who were not appreciating their butch
Mhm.
daughter. And as puberty approached, her anxiety was getting, higher and higher. And oh, I'm going to forget the names, but the psychiatrist approached an endocrinologist and said, "How about we do this?" And so they did the puberty blockers for that one person. And
Wow.
that's the only long-term follow-up that I've seen published in the medical literature, is sort of a return visit to this trans man, 20 years later.
The
And
only?
the only long-term, and I define long-term as like
Yeah.
10 years or more.
Sure. Okay.
Because that's when you really, I mean, that's like regret seems to come, like people talk about the 7-year itch in
Yeah.
marriages.
Yeah.
7, 10 years is sort of like 7, 10 years after a momentous decision is when sometimes, obviously not all the time, but
Mhm.
sometimes people are
Mhm.
like, maybe that wasn't the best decision.
Right.
So this person was, I can't remember, 15 years out,
Mhm.
and they're like, "See, gainfully employed, has an apartment, like doing well,
Mhm.
success."
Mhm.
But if you read the description, this person had dated a few people, but never settled in, never found a life partner, never settled into thing because he was unhappy with his genitals, because he had like some kind of bogus
Right.
phalloplasty, and was kind of like, about that.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
Sasha and Stella, who I'm sure you know,
Cars.
yes,
Love.
they were interviewing the Dutch researchers,
Mhm.
Steensma and De Vries, and
Mhm.
they brought up this one long-term follow-up,
Yeah.
and they're like, it seems kind of sad, no life partner, and the Dutch response was like, well, I mean, they're doing okay. What do you expect? you know, like
Yeah, right.
we're not hoping for like a totally fulfilling life. They're alive, aren't they? It was just
Wow.
amazing. They're just like, what are you talking about? And
Wow.
so anyway, so the Dutch are the ones that came up with this idea,
Mhm.
and they did the one, and they thought that went okay, and so they're like, okay, we got to figure out, like, they totally acknowledge the fact that the majority of kids who have a cross gender identification in young childhood
Mhm.
lose that with puberty. So they're like, we got to figure out which ones are going to persist. We don't want to have any false positives. Like we don't want to
Right.
do surgery on a kid that would have desisted. So they were meeting with these kids frequently. They required that the parents be on board,
Mhm.
like if the parents weren't on board, they're like, yeah, you're not going to be in our study.
Mm.
And also they discouraged the parents from doing a social transition. They're
Mm.
like if the parent came in and said, this is my daughter Anna, and they're like, no, that's your son,
Right.
you're a boy, and it's possible that later we're gonna do some things to make you look more like a girl, but like, they were very reality based
Right.
with the kids, which I don't think we're doing in the United States. What we're doing in the United States is just awful. But anyway, back to the Dutch. They were very, like, trying to keep it grounded in reality. They're like, "No, you have a son, but if things continue like this and he hits puberty and he still really, really, really wants to transition, then we'll do these things so that he makes a better transition."
Mm.
And it was just like they started with 110, and then I think they gave puberty blockers to 70 something, and then they end up with only 55 at the end of it,
Wow.
like after the surgery. But they
Mhm.
went puberty blockers, and they didn't give the puberty blockers until they were 12,
Mhm.
and then they gave cross-sex hormones at 16, and
Mm.
then they did surgeries, I think, at 18. And
Wow.
so by the end of it, they were down to 55,
Mm.
and one of those 55 died from surgical
Oh,
complications because
right.
it was a male. And when you block puberty, then the penis doesn't grow. And the
Okay.
traditional vaginoplasty is a penile inversion.
Uh-huh.
So they sort of remove the glands and they say that's the clitoris and they stick it up there. And then
Uh-huh, right.
they take the rest of the penis and sort of turn it inside out.
Mhm.
And then that's the vaginal cavity that
Uh-huh.
needs to be dilated or it'll
Mhm.
close. And, they didn't have enough material because if you block puberty, then the penis doesn't grow, and so
Wow.
the kid is 18, but they have the penis of a 12-year-old, and if you're a late bloomer, that could be very small. Um,
Wow.
boys vary a lot, like
Of
early bloomers,
course.
late bloomers, like there's a
Yeah.
lot of in difference. And, so I'm guessing, 'cause they didn't do it till 12, but I'm guessing he was a late bloomer, and so they used something from the gut, maybe colon tissue,
Mm.
and then the kid got an infection. They
Wow.
thought they'd gotten rid of all the germs, but they hadn't, and
Wow.
then just an overwhelming infection, and despite antibiotics, the kid died.
Oh my god.
And so
That's
that's 1 out of 55. That's almost 2%.
wow.
It's a
That's right.
high fatality rate for a
Yep.
thing that is basically cosmetic in nature.
It is.
Yeah.
It
So,
it
yeah,
is
The
cosmetic.
Dutch
I didn't do
study.
that. I
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't do the penis
You're like, "No,
surgery.
no, no."
No,
Oh,
you
man,
know,
that surgery is a disaster. It's got,
it
like,
is such and,
isn't it like a
in the
3/4 complication rate? It's
it's
so high.
insane, and,
Insanely high, yeah.
I don't wanna shame any guy out there who's chosen to do that. You go right ahead, but, I really, do not believe that surgery should be offered to trans men because
Mm,
it doesn't function like a penis, and you're not
no, it
getting what
can't.
you think you're getting, and I do know guys who've had huge complications that ruin their life, it ruined their sex life, it ruins
Mhm,
I learned how to function with my vagina, and it's not a big deal. It doesn't give me dysphoria. It doesn't do any of that stuff.
yeah, yeah.
I'm just a guy that has a certain type of body, right? But that being said,
Mhm.
now, so you see these studies, right, from 1980, you're saying, which is like a million years ago, as far as I'm concerned, and now here we are in the United States,
Yeah.
and let's talk about that because
Well, yeah,
this
so in
is
the United States, I
yeah,
think it started in Boston,
okay,
and, Laura Edwards Leeper is a psychologist that I've met, and
yeah,
she was, like, brand new out of her training, and they sent her to Holland to learn
mm,
about what the Dutch were doing.
mm,
And so there's a thing there's a thing that happens when you're at the beginning of your training.
mm.
um, Dr. Stephen Levine calls it the chain of trust. When you
Mm,
are learning things, you just have to trust that everything people are telling you is true because you
wow.
don't have the time and you don't have the brain space to check the references. Right?
Okay.
You just have to, like, if they tell you these are the 3 causes of hypernatremia, then you just believe, "Okay, those are the 3 causes of
Right.
like, that kinda thing. You don't
Right.
you're stuffing all these facts into your head. You don't have time to, like, "Well, there's some debate on that." And so I really do feel like that Dr. Edwards Leeper was just, new in her career. She went to Holland. They said, "This is how it's done." She's like, "Okay." And then she came back and started doing it in Boston. And then
Mm,
it spread, and then it was in, I don't know how long it's been going on in Los Angeles, but it started with just a few.
mhm.
And then it was around 2015 that it just really took off.
That's right.
and it's, like,
Yeah.
everywhere. And in
Well, it's
Portland, we have 2 pediatric gender clinics. There's
you
2
have
of them.
that doctor there. What's his
And the
name?
doctor with the pink hair, I can't
Ugh,
remember his name.
me
Yeah,
neither.
the
Not
surgeon who does, like,
gross.
non-binary nullification
Oh,
surgery, 'cause that makes sense.
no, I think that's actually insane. I'll be honest with you. I remember
Yeah,
back in the day, like, it was sad trans people really didn't have medical care. I remember they used to do stuff like that to themselves, like really cut their own penises off or, try to cut
right.
your boobs off. I mean, that really people
Yeah,
were desperate on some level. But these were, but anyway, that being said, now we're offering surgeries where you can
right?
literally have no penis or vagina. What? What?
I don't know, I don't know. I think a lot of the times it's a response to sexual trauma.
Yeah,
I
I
I
agree.
I saw, like, a
I agree.
Reddit post, it was a screenshot of a Reddit post, but it was somebody saying, like, "I got this surgery, and now I can never be raped again."
Oh god, that just
Yeah,
freaks me out.
and it's just really, really sad.
I think there's a lot of sexual trauma attached to what's happening today. I really
Yes.
do with these young people.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, it just says
I
it to
mean,
me.
personal experience of sexual trauma, but then I also wanna say that right now, we are conducting a worldwide, at least nationwide,
Mhm,
experiment on
mhm.
what happens to an entire generation of young people who are exposed to really bad, nasty porn
That's right.
from a young age.
That's right.
It's crazy.
It's great. Well,
So I talk to kids.
this
So
you can go on this and see everything it
exactly.
is.
You can just be on your phone, and then the kids whose parents are smart enough to seriously try to lock down their phone, if they have a smartphone, kids who don't have parents that have locked down their phone, text it to them. They're getting porn texted to them by their friends
My
in, like,
god.
5th grade.
Oh,
So, I'm a pediatrician, that's my job, and I do well child checks, and I love where I
mm,
work because I have a
mm,
half hour for my well child checks, and so
mm,
basically age 12 and up, I try to get some time with the kid alone,
mhm,
so the parent steps out,
mm,
and I say, "Are you dating?" And they say
mm,
no because it's a global pandemic and who's dating? Most of the time they say no. And then I say, "Okay, if you were dating,
mhm,
would you date boys or girls or both?"
mhm.
And I had a 12-year-old girl answer me, "Neither." And I'm like, "Neither." That's really interesting. Let's talk about this. And it turned out that she'd just seen some really nasty porn, women being choked, women being tied up, all this stuff. And she was just like, "Ah, that looks terrible. I want
My
nothing to do
god.
with that. Keep that away from me. I don't want any of it." And so I was like, "Oh, sweetie, I'm sorry, that is not real life." And so I actually for a few years now, I've been making a point of talking to kids
Mm,
about the porn and about how
right.
it's brain poison, and I
Yep.
know it's so easy, like, you don't have to look for it, it
Nope.
finds you,
That's right.
but just try to stay away from it because it is not real life and it is
Mm.
brain poison. I'm always like, porn is a billion-dollar industry, and I don't know how they make so much money when they give away
Uh,
so much for free, but the point of porn is to get men, because
That's
porn
right.
is for men,
That's
is to
right.
get men
That's right.
to pull out their credit cards to pay for the good stuff.
Well,
And when I was a kid in the '70s, the good stuff was like, "She's got breast implants."
that's right.
It's like, "Oh, wow, look, her boobies are so big, that's really exciting, wow." But, like, now but then after a while, like, an 8-year-old boy can find a picture of
I
a
know.
woman with breast implants now, so nobody cares.
No,
Nobody cares. So
no.
then they move on, and it has to be more, and then it has to be more, and
Yep,
they just had to get edgier and edgier.
that's
And do
right.
you remember how in the '90s, all the late night comics, like a common line of the late night comics was that, like, there was porn for everything?
Oh,
Like,
right.
anything you searched for, you
That's
could
right.
find.
That's right.
And I realized they were basically crowdsourcing the porn, like,
Oh,
people would search for it, and then the companies would be like, "Oh, apparently people want something to do with a
oh,
rooster," whatever it was, whatever people searched
wow.
for, it's market research, right? They were using the searching as the market
Wow.
research. And so just absolutely everything,
Anything. That's
any
right.
depraved thought that anybody has had over the past 30 years
That's
is
right.
now available online.
It's
And it's
true.
crazy. It's crazy. I had a fif 15-year-old boy tell me that he was having problems getting erections. and I with real people. And I told him, "Okay, no porn
That's
for
right.
6 months,
Yep.
and you're gonna be fine."
Yep.
And he was like, "Mm." Like,
Wow.
I could tell I had, like, nailed him. He's like, "Oh, man, yeah, okay." So I was like, "Yeah, you've watched so much crazy stuff that actual ordinary humans are not doing it for you, and
That's
that's
right.
insane. That's just insane."
No, I believe I worked in pornography. I'm very
Yeah,
open about that, and I did something that, I felt was important at the time. I still do. I stand by my stuff, but I'm be honest with you, I work in an industry that there are peo it's a very large industry, and there are insane
huge.
what you're talking about, I'm very against, and I'm very outspoken about it. I
Mhm.
make things for consenting adults. I'm very much in a very much of a space there. And, there are things I don't like about the pornography industry, and once the
Sure.
internet took off, oh my god, forget it. It was a free for all, and there
Right.
is there is no
Really,
child
no.
ever that should be exposed. I mean, I have a child, never allowed in my office, not around my stuff, doesn't you know what I mean? I
Mhm.
have very big boundaries around that kind of stuff. But that being
Yeah.
said, the fact that it's so
I think that the
accessible.
exposure to porn can constitute sexual trauma for
Of
kids that
course.
haven't actually had physical sexual trauma, and that
Yes.
can drive kids away from their
That's
body.
right. I
Yeah,
totally agree with you on that. There's some weird, crazy, insane
yeah,
that's not pornography. That is something else to me. And I just think it's so gross that kids have such access to it. And
yeah,
and laws are not.
and the parents don't know.
Yep, that's
They
right.
don't know how much porn their kids are seeing.
They
So, I
don't.
mean, I talk about this, and it's about 1 out of 20 where
What?
I talk it's about 1 out of 20 where I talk and the kid's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Okay."
Oh, wow.
Like 95% of the kids, I mean, I'm not gonna say that 95% of them are, like, consuming large amounts or anything,
Yeah, right,
but
right.
95% of the kids are like, "Yes, I know what you're talking about. I'm trying,"
Wow.
you know?
Wow. That is.
And I've had a couple who had addictions, you know?
Well, I mean,
So,
it happens. I mean, because
mhm,
you just become so you desensitized on some level.
yes,
You need more and more. It's like drugs. It really
it is like
is.
drugs. It
It's
is like
literally the
drugs.
same thing. It's the same addictive behavior. It's the same. I'm a recovering addict of all of that drugs and alcohol. But that being said, like it's exactly the same thing.
Mhm.
You need more and more. And
More and
I
more.
see the kids. So the kids now who are transition so do you get parents coming to see you who want to transition their children?
I have. I'm very lucky in that I work in a small privately owned pediatric practice. I'm not the owner. I'm not the I have a boss, but my boss is a libertarian
Mhm,
and he
mhm.
knows what I do and how I feel and he's good with it. So
Great,
that's good. So I'm able to speak up, which is
great.
unusual. Most pediatricians work for large sort of vertically integrated healthcare systems. And so the management have decided that trans is the new gay and this is the new civil rights movement and you need to get on board and right side of history and all that kind of stuff. So I can speak out, but one of the other things that's nice about where I work is I work in Gresham, and this is sort of a working class suburb of Portland,
Mhm.
and probably at least 3/4 of my patients are on Medicaid, are on public
Mhm.
health insurance, and
Sure,
Oregon does a marvelous job of covering the population. They did it
right.
before Obamacare,
Mhm,
so that's nice. So, I have so few uninsured patients, which is great, but
mhm.
3/4 of my patients are on public, insurance, and the parents are just busy, like, it's a different life, and so I don't
Oh,
have as many because it really seems like the majority of these recent, what you might call rapid onset gender dysphoria, the
yeah,
ROGD
yeah.
kids are upper middle class or wealthy kids, you know.
Wow.
It's a weird mix because there's also a lot of really stressed out kids, kids in foster care,
Sure,
things
sure.
like that. And I've had a couple of that. I've had a couple of that, but the kids that I had that were sort of in rough situations in foster care and identified as cross sex,
Mhm.
they desisted before they medicalized. The 2 that I'm thinking of. But I've had less than a dozen trans patients where I
S
am because trans is not it's just not a big thing in the population I'm working with. But
so
I did
that's
have Mhm.
uh-huh. Well, that's
I was gonna say
interesting to me. That's interesting because then that says to me because if trans kids were a thing, then it would be across every social economic structure. It wouldn't just
Right.
be relegated to what you just said, which I see obviously myself, white upper middle class, right? Why isn't it happening in other
Right.
spaces?
Right. Yeah. I mean, in some places, I know that in Canada, there's a doctor on the West Coast who is transing like a ton of Native American and kids in foster care. So, I know that it does happen in vulnerable populations 'cause if you're vulnerable for any reason,
There you go.
this is something the possibility of being a whole new person
Yeah,
is just super appealing. No matter
that's right.
for Hilary Cass is the pediatrician who did the,
Mhm,
systematic review of the evidence for England and wrote up a big report, and they're shutting down the Tavistock clinic, and they're like, "Yeah, we're not doing this like that.
yeah,
We're not gonna do puberty blockers for kids." And she had a wonderful graphic that sort of demonstrated there are many paths into trans and there are many paths out.
mhm,
It's not as simple as some people say. But in my own personal experience, I remember it was 2nd or 3rd, trans patient that I referred to the gender clinic was, a young natal female that I didn't know, maybe had
mhm,
been going to my clinic, but I didn't know her, and sort of came in for a well check and said, "I'm trans and I need a referral to the gender clinic," and
mhm,
was there with her mother and, and they're both like,
mhm,
"Yeah, yeah," and I'm like, "Okay," because previously I had referred, a kid who passed as male before any medicalization,
mhm,
just really seemed to be sort of the classic from the age of 2,
mhm.
and persisting, blah, blah, blah. But this one, I was like, huh, well, the specialist will figure it out. And nope, she got affirmed, you know, got started on testosterone in high school and then had top
Wow,
surgery between high school and starting college,
wow.
and I saw him one more time as a college student, came in for a well check and was, seemed happy. So that was
Okay.
like my happiest one, but like all the other ones didn't thrive. The
Yeah,
one that I mentioned first
yeah,
um, was very convincing and came in, and I'm like, oh yeah, trans, that's a thing. I've heard of that. Yeah, we
mhm,
got a gender clinic. I can refer you. And I referred him, and then he came back to our clinic saying, "Oh my god, testosterone's a shot. I hate shots. I hate needles. They say I'm supposed to give myself this shot." And I'm like,
mhm,
"Okay, well, you could just bring it here and we can't get paid for it, but just bring it here and we'll give you the
mhm,
shot." So, came into the clinic for the shots for a while, and then we taught his grandmother to
mhm,
give them, and then, but I saw him for years through the transition because he had ADHD, and I
mhm,
was treating him for that. And he'd go periods of time where he'd, no showed
mhm,
appointments and, who knows what was happening, but then he'd come back until he was 21.
mhm,
And he never like, failure to launch, didn't go to
mhm.
college, didn't learn a
Oh,
trade, didn't, just, like, working for minimum wage here or there,
mhm.
and I think the last job was, like, literally working in a factory that galvanizes metal, like, just the
Wow,
classic crappy young man job where you're
totally.
exposing yourself to toxins because 'cause you're a disposable member of society,
Yeah,
which is
right,
how we treat young men.
totally.
Um and I saw him a couple of times when he was not happy and said, "Every time I get a girlfriend, they leave me for a real boy." I was like I was like,
Oh,
"Oh, that's really sad." So, he didn't really thrive, and then another one who I had seen for years, middle school, high school, and then the way she did it, or I guess he did it, was as soon as he turned 18, he
mhm.
took the $300 he'd saved up and he went to the courthouse and did a legal name change, and that's the first that any of us heard that
Wow,
there was a trans identity, like, just boom, just showed up. It's like, "This is my name,"
wow.
wanted a referral, and by this time, I was skeptical of the whole thing, and I was,
Mhm,
like, not really into it, and so I'm like, "Well, I can't refer you to the pediatric gender clinic because 'cause you're 18, so,
mhm.
can't help ya."
Right.
And that's silly, I coulda Googled the adult gender clinic, but sometimes with kids, you just put up, like, this little barrier, and they don't jump it.
That's true.
But he did, he jumped it. Like, gave us a call, and he's like, I found the adult gender clinic, here's the number," and I was like,
Wow.
"Alright." So I put in a referral, started testosterone, and just the same thing, just working at Fred Meyer's, which is a grocery
Yep.
store, and also being treated for ADHD, and was, one of, 4 friends in all of friend group
That
that
all
yeah,
transition,
they all
right?
transitioned. Yeah,
That's right.
they all
There's
transitioned.
that. That has me up. Also, let's talk a little bit about autism.
Oh, yeah.
So I see this idea that if you're autistic, you're
Mhm.
trans. Like that's a huge thing with these young people, and
Mm,
then transitioning autistic. In my eyes, I'm like, but wait a minute here. That seems a little bit strange to me because we never had that in our community before. All of a sudden, now
right.
these young autistic, mostly girls, I see. Right?
Mostly girls. I am beginning to agree with people who say that it's not really that most people with autism are male. It's
Hmm.
just that most people who've been diagnosed with autism are male. That if you're
Uh,
female and you have autism, you're able to mask better
uh,
because the strengths of a female brain counteract the weaknesses of autism. Some people say that the
wow.
autistic brain is a very male brain, you know.
Wow.
And
Fascinating.
so an autistic girl will sort of figure it out.
Mm,
Will figure out how to get by even if she's not as able to pick up on people's emotions as
right.
the other girls. She figures out pretty fast because girl society is super unforgiving.
Oh gosh.
If you mess up on social cues, like you're doomed. It's
Totally.
it's interesting. Female bullying is almost like harder to deal with than
I
male
think so.
bullying. If a girl is being bullied by other girls, sometimes the only thing you can do is put them in a new school. Like there's just no way out of it. Whereas, like, with boys, it's just I don't know, it's just the way that males and females do aggression. If 2 boys have a fight and they come to blows, and
Mhm,
they punch each other,
mhm,
and one of them quite obviously wins,
mhm.
they could be friends the next
That's
day.
true.
They could be like, "Yep, you can
Yes.
kick my ass. So noted." And they move on,
That's
right?
true.
But
Yep.
if females get into a fight to that
So
degree,
true.
oh, no, 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 no. Now I hate you, and all my friends hate you,
So true.
and it's important that everybody hate you, like,
Wow.
that's because women don't have strong upper body strength and
Yeah,
a powerful punch, and women do not deal with, you know,
right.
aggression via fisticuffs. you
That's
know,
right. Yeah.
they have soft power, they have
Mhm,
social power, and they wield it, and it's just different. It looks different. So an autistic girl learns pretty quickly that she has to get by, and so the things that she does to get by also mean that teachers, parents, doctors
mhm,
are not picking up on her autism and
mhm.
I know so many detransitioners who also have a diagnosis of
That's
autism.
right.
And they're like, all these things that I thought meant I was male were actually just because I was autistic.
Oh my god, this is heartbreaking for me. All of what you're saying is heartbreaking to me because, transition should be a last resort as far as I'm concerned. It should not be. I feel like we're just shoving kids into this, but that makes sense to me why so many young girls are transitioning
Mhm.
who are autistic, right? It just makes
Yeah. It's
so
like
much sense.
that explains why I never got along with the other girls. That explains why I got
Right.
along better with boys. That
That's right.
explains why I like things more than people. It just explains so many things. It really seems to.
What
It's
would you
easy.
say to a parent maybe who might have an autistic child who is
Keep her off
insisting
the
they're
internet.
trans? Right on.
Keep her off the
Seriously.
internet if you can, keep her off the internet. And then even if you're like, "Okay, my kid's in middle school and takes the train to school and, I need her to have a phone. I can't,
Mhm,
whatever. My
mhm,
kid's 15, and I
mhm.
can't take away the phone." It is still reasonable for you as the parent to have a rule
Yeah,
that the phones go to bed in the kitchen.
yeah,
You do not get to be in your bedroom all alone with the internet.
right.
Like, you would not let your child wander around in downtown Portland, you know, because there's creepy people there. But you know what? It's nothing is as bad as the internet. The
That's right.
internet is worse than any creepy inner city thing you can think of.
That's
Do
right.
not let your child wander around on the internet unsupervised. So, I have a couple kids, and what we did for a long time
Mhm.
was, the only computer that had the internet was in the middle of the house, was
Mhm.
next to the kitchen.
Yep.
And so anything they were doing, I could see over their shoulder,
Great.
you know? So you just don't want a kid
No.
locked up in the room scrolling. I mean, if it's a boy, the problem what you're worried about is porn usually. And
That's right. No, totally. Yeah.
if it's a girl, bizarrely, things
Yeah.
like Instagram can be really, really hard on girls.
Because of,
Um
like, pictures of things or
Just
trying to
because they're so social, right? Like
yeah,
girls
right.
are incredibly social
Right.
beings. And even though the smart part of your brain, like the front of your brain, knows that your friend took 15 pictures and
Right.
then picked the best one and then applied 3 filters
That's
and
right.
blah, 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 blah. Even though like you know that in the front of your brain,
Mhm.
in the back of your brain and your little monkey brain,
Mhm.
you're like, oh, everybody's cuter than me and has a more
Right.
fun life. My life
Mhm.
sucks. Everybody else is happy and I'm sad. You just can't help it. It happens to adults.
That's right.
So how could a kid be safe from this?
Oh god, I swear it's heartbreaking to watch all these kids just, like, say they're trans,
Mhm.
and being s I really believe it's a social contagion, and I
Yeah,
do see kids just wanting to be trans. Who wants to be trans? That's when I was like, "Red flag, who wants to be trans? This is not a
right.
joy." I have no joy, honestly, I don't.
Yeah,
I have a great life, but I would have picked being born a dude over this in any
right.
second
Yeah.
of the day.
And yet, I
These
remember, like,
mantras.
in 2019 when I would try to say that, like, be on Twitter and say, "Trans is a hard life, and
That's
why
right.
would we be steering the kids?" They're like, "Oh, you hate trans people." And I'm like, "No, I don't hate trans people. It's just that it's an adult decision, and it's a
Thank you.
difficult path, and I don't know, remember Bill Clinton used to say for abortion, he
Yeah.
wanted to be safe, legal,
Mhm,
and rare.
mhm.
And I
Right
think I
on,
have a similar attitude
right on.
about transition. I
That's
think that
right.
we need to do more research.
Thank
We
you.
need to figure out the side effects of these medicines. We need to figure out ways to do the surgery if we got to do the surgery.
Yeah.
But we don't need to be experimenting on children. And yeah, it needs to be like you said. It's a treatment course of last resort.
I mean,
It's after you've Mhm.
wouldn't you want a kid to grow out of it?
Right. Have you heard about Az Hakim? He's a
S Oh,
psychiatrist in
yeah, no, didn't he
England.
write a book? Didn't
He's written a book, yeah, he's written a book called Trans,
Yeah, he
and
sent it to me.
oh, it's wonderful. So if in there you can see he took on the transsexual. They were called transsexuals then, right? This is like
Right.
the '90s, and he had this brilliant idea to mix pre-op and post-op transsexual patients in a group therapy session. So there's
Mm,
just 8 people in a session, but he
mm,
didn't do separate. He mixed them.
mm.
And obviously, not every post-op patient was gonna go for group therapy, right? And so the ones who were going for group therapy for the ones who were, like, not 100% satisfied with their life. So, it's a
Right.
self-selected. But what he found was that for the pre-op, having weekly exposure and getting to know some post-op transsexuals who did the thing, and it didn't fix everything,
Yeah.
made 90% of them were like, "You know what? I'm not gonna do that."
Wow.
They're like, "Never mind." Because it's so easy to do that, right? It's a very difficult
That's right.
path, and it's sort of like this hero's journey, and we're gonna
Yep.
do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and it's hard, and and then you recover from the surgery, and then you're like, "Oh, that didn't do it." And then you think about the next one, and you can never be totally happy because
Nope.
there are some things that can never, ever be changed,
Ever,
ever.
ever. My biology.
Hence.
I'm an actual female.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, it's so dumb that we're, like, acting like you can change your biology. These are the
yeah,
tropes, and these are, to
mhm,
me, very much, traps that they're creating, who's ever creating this,
yeah,
so that these actual kids think that they're gonna change. I think it's
right.
disgusting that you tell a child, "Oh, we're gonna change your sex." No, you're
Ah,
not. No, you're
no,
not.
exactly. I had that. So I got into this, I think, in 2019,
Mhm.
and then I think it was, January of 21, I wrote to Louis First. Louis First is a doctor who is the editor-in-chief for the journal Pediatrics. It's the official journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is my
Okay.
professional society,
Right.
and I wrote to him complaining because he had picked this Jack Turban paper
Oh,
as the number 1 paper of the year. And I'm
unbelievable.
like, "How could you pick this paper?" It's
Wow.
like he's data mining the 2015 USTS, survey, which
Yep.
was an online convenience sample survey. They asked people online, they offered prizes for participation,
Yep.
and it was not representative of the United States population, it was not representative of the United States transgender population. There was, like, a ridiculous percentage of people who turned 18 on the day they filled out the survey,
God.
you know? And yet he keeps it's a big database, it's like 15,000 responses, and so
Mhm.
there's this statistics software, I think it's called Strata, and you can run it, you can run it, and then you can find associations, and then you can publish it if you're Jack Turban.
Wow.
And so he was just publishing some of these bogus associations that he found in this bogus database. And so I wrote to him and I'm like, I can't believe you picked that as the number 1 paper of the year. And at first he's like, oh, well, we didn't do it because of its quality. We did it because of engagement. It got the most clicks.
Huh.
And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I saw you on a video saying it was groundbreaking research, blah, blah, blah. He
Ah.
said, okay, well, you should submit something. I'm like, yeah, I'm highly skeptical that you're gonna publish anything that I write. And he's like, well, you might be surprised. I was like, okay. So the Journal Pediatrics has something called Pediatrics Perspectives, and it's little missives from people like me, just regular old pediatricians who are out there
Mhm.
doing pediatrics, and it's our perspective. So I wrote a perspective, and the title was Far from Settled Science.
Hmm.
It's like the science is not settled on this. We do not know what we're doing.
Mhm.
And one of the lines I had in that paper you just reminded me of is a child that's less than 8 will believe the adults if he is told that
Wow.
when he's older, the doctors will change his sex.
Oh my
We
god.
cannot do that, and it's cruel to imply that we can. And they sent my paper out to gender doctors for review, and there was one gender doctor, and then they said, "We're rejecting your paper." And then they gave me copies of the reviewer statements. So one of the
Yeah.
reviewers said that this statement, "We can't change anybody's sex, and it's cruel to imply that we
Yeah.
can to a
Yeah.
child." This statement would be offensive to pediatric readers of the journal Pediatrics. And I'm like, "Wait a second. This is a medical journal, it's a journal for pediatricians." I was a gifted child, and I read above grade level, but I was not reading medical journals. No. Not even in undergrad, like, that was not a thing. And then another one was just
Wow.
took offense at the statement saying, "Well, we do make a lot of changes." And it's like, "Yeah,
Wow.
but you don't. We cannot
Oh my
change
god.
anybody's sex. It can't
Nope.
be done." And when you have a little kid, they believe what the adults say. You have a
That's
little
right.
kid, Buck, right? You
That's
know
right.
that,
100%.
right? Magical
100%.
thinking. They
That's
think
right.
so if you tell this to a 5-year-old, they think that, like, when they get older, there's gonna be some kind of magic wand, and
That's
then
right.
I'm gonna be a mom. I'm gonna have babies. And it's
That's
like,
right.
no, 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 never.
Wow.
And, that's not the case for a 12-year-old, but it's definitely the case for 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old.
My god. The fact that your
And
own people are sort of are having even this argument first off, it's your opinion, right? Which
right.
should be able to have within a medical space. Isn't that supposed to be part of
It would
medicine?
be nice to have some debate, but, we're not having any. So I went in October of 2019, I went to the American Academy of Pediatrics National Convention. That was the
Okay.
last one before the pandemic, and it was in New
Right.
Orleans.
Uh-huh.
And then I attended my regional meeting. So my region is Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Alaska, Hawaii.
Mhm.
And so people were doing sort of presentations about what they'd done. And I waited until the end when we could ask questions because this was my only opportunity to interact with leadership was the regional meeting. So I went to the
Mhm.
regional meeting, it's like 6:30 in the morning, and I waited till it was time and I raised my hand and he says yes. And I stand up and I say, I'm a pediatrician near Portland, Oregon, and I'm getting concerned about all of these kids being sent to the gender every single kid that I send to the gender clinic is being affirmed. And then I looked, and the AP has a statement that came out in 2018 which says that there's only one thing to do if a kid tells you,
Wow.
that they have a cross sex gender identity. You have to affirm. And that I'm concerned about that, and I don't think the evidence, supports that. And all these people were glaring at me, and there was this one man that was glaring at me so much, I had to, like, look at him and lock eyes and be like, "Yes, I see you glaring at me. Stop," you know? So, the guy, like, I don't know what leader he was, he's like, "Well, what you need to do is you need to submit a resolution to the annual leadership forum because that's your opportunity as a pediatrician to, influence what the AAP does." And I'm like, "Oh,
Right.
okay." And I sat down, and then when the meeting was over, I went up to him and I'm like, "Okay, submitting a resolution, how do I do that? Where
Mhm.
does it go? What's the deadline?" And I could tell from the way he reacted to me that this was sort of his go-to for annoying people, and
Hmm.
he really didn't expect me to actually do it. And lo and behold, like the deadline's in a week. But at that
Oh,
point, I was already in the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine, which is
excellent.
SEGM website,
Ex
segm.org.
Yep.
Highly recommend it. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I've got smart people who can help me. And so I did. I submitted two resolutions that year, just under the bell.
Mhm,
And then the pandemic came. And so the meeting was virtual. And
mhm.
I got to listen. And they're like, resolutions 17 and 22 don't have sponsors. Is anybody willing to sponsor them? And it was silent. And so my resolutions kind of died a quiet death. And
Oh,
then
wow.
the next year, we kinda lost a year because of the pandemic, so there wasn't a 2020. And then in 2021, Sarah Palmer's a pediatrician in Indiana, and she submitted a resolution. I didn't know her until after she submitted the resolution, but I
Mhm,
consider her to be a friend now, and she had the same concerns,
mhm.
from over there in Indiana. And her resolution, she submitted it without a sponsor. And because of the pandemic, they put all the resolutions online and then they sent us all, the fellows of the American Academy of Pediatrics, they sent us all an email going, "Hey, go and look at the resolutions, and you can like give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. You can leave comments." And her resolution was like in the top 4 or 5 of engagement. And
Wow.
this is not thousands of pediatricians, this is like dozens of pediatricians, but
Okay.
still, of the people who bothered to go to the website and
Right.
look at the resolutions and then click on something, it was in the top 4, and they had like 80 of them.
Wow.
Um, and then of the feedback, it was, I think, 3 to 1 positive, like
Wow.
3 out of 4 pediatricians who bothered to click on something said, "Yes, I agree with Dr. Palmer. I'm concerned
Wow.
about what's going on." And
Wow.
then there were comments, and it was similar, at least 2/3 of the some of the comments were like, "Oh god, this is transphobic, it needs to die." But a fair number of the comments were also, "Yes, what's going on here? We need, what's going on and what's with that statement and blah, blah, blah."
Right.
So then the next year, um the next year, Segum tried to have a table at the AAP, and we
Huh.
sent them our money. And then they sent us an email going, "The AAP reserves the right to decide who comes to our conference, and you don't." And they gave us our money
Wow.
back. But I submitted another resolution with me and Sarah Palmer and 3 other pediatricians,
Mhm,
and we thought we had somebody to second it,
mhm.
and then they fell through. And I feel like they had pressure applied to them. But
They totally
anyway.
did.
Yeah, and so that one also went up on the internet because that's how
Yeah.
we're doing things these days, but they had a new rule. And the new rule is unsponsored resolutions, you can't comment and you
Wow.
can't vote. So,
Huh.
like, one part of the website had the resolutions and you could read it. But then there was another thing where you clicked and then there was sort of a drop down list,
Yeah.
and it just went from number 26 to number 28. It skipped to number 27, which was my resolution. And
Wow.
so what a few pediatricians did was they wrote comments on like number 28. Like,
Uh,
"Hey, I wanted to comment on number 27 and what
smart.
happened to that, blah blah." So they did. So this year I submitted another resolution, and it died a quiet death because I couldn't get this, it didn't even come up for vote because I couldn't get a sponsor. Your resolution is not taken seriously unless a member of leadership sponsors it, and that is a chapter president, like every state has a chapter president, a section leader, a committee chairman, something
Wow.
like that. And the numbers, like the leadership of the AAP is probably in the hundreds, maybe.
Okay.
It's not a huge number. There's 65,000 pediatricians, but then the leadership is just, the people who had all these
Right.
committees. And it's a much smaller number of people. And as I'm learning, it's a pretty insular group. Like,
Clearly.
I've been voting for AAP president, and it wasn't until like the last time that I realized, there's no primary process. They
Wow.
just present us with two dudes, with not two people, not necessarily dudes. They present us with two, and we get to pick. So it's
That's
kind of
right.
democratic, but not
Kinda.
democratic, kinda, yeah. So this year I had 23 co-sponsors. So it
Wow.
was 23 and me, and I had a lot more pediatricians who wanted to, but then I asked them, "Are you a fellow of the American Academy of
Yeah,
Pediatrics?" And they're like, "Oh, right." I stopped sending them money because 'cause I'm so annoyed with them.
that's right.
So, yeah, so
But
it
that's a
is
great
very
sign. People are
yeah,
starting to
more
see.
pediatricians, yeah.
That's the problem with these organizations, right? They're all kind of self-appointed, like WPATH, all of that stuff.
Mm.
People just think like they're the end all be all. No, they're not people. You need to understand those are
Oh my god.
self-appointed organizations of people who
Yeah.
just it's insular, what you just said. Same
Mhm.
sounds to me the APA is the same, but
Yeah.
people take it as if it's God, right? And
Right?
like
Yeah. No, the WPATH identifies as a professional
they're
association.
disgusting and they're not.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody
Oh my
says.
god. No,
They're
they're really bad.
not.
But, yeah, the story with the AAP is that, Jason Rafferty was still in training when he approached the leadership, kinda all, like, intense and excited, and, like that
Yeah,
I said, he's early in his training, and so
yeah,
whatever he's told, he believes,
yeah.
and he worked at Brown with, Michelle Forcier. Did you see the documentary, What Is a Woman?
Yep.
So Michelle's the blue-haired lady
Oh
who, when
god.
asked about chickens,
Ugh,
it's a female because they lay
she's
eggs, and she
crazy,
was
that
like,
lady.
"Can a chicken commit suicide? Can a chicken cry?" So for the rest of my life, she will be the chicken lady, right? So Jason Rafferty was a protege of the chicken lady, right?
Great.
He studied under her, and she very much believes that every child has a gendered soul and
Ugh,
it's deep inside them and only they know what it is. And the way you find out is you just ask the kid and then they tell you and then that's it. And you move forward. Um, but
wow.
so he was her protege. I don't know how he gets access to the AP leadership, but he approaches leadership and he's like, "Hey, like trans is it's the new gay. It's like the new civil rights movement. We need to be on the
Wow.
right side of history." And all these leadership who are, people like us in late 50s, early 60s, and they're like, "Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
okay, yeah, I want to be on the right side of history. So, white, how about you write something up and we'll take a look at it
right
and see how
on.
it goes." And so he wrote up this statement, this 2018 statement, and it's got this weird line in it about how Jason Rafferty is solely responsible for the content of this, which I haven't seen in other American Academy of
Wow.
Pediatrics statements. So somebody felt a little wonky about it. Like
That's right.
somebody made that come in. But then like
That's right.
the the LGBTQ whatever committee approved it, and the Adolescent Medicine Committee approved it. So they're also listed. They're not really listed as co-authors, but they're listing as
Mhm,
approving it.
mhm.
And the thing is, nobody checked it. Nobody checked
Wow.
his references. So he's talking about how, to try to hold space for a kid to see if they desist. He's like, "That's conversion therapy, and
What?
conversion therapy is evil and wrong." And then he's got 3 references, and you go look at the references, and they're about doing terrible things to adult male homosexuals.
Oh
It
my
has
god.
nothing to do with children.
Nothing.
It has the word conversion, but, it has nothing to do with children. And that happened all the time. So James Cantor, you
Mhm.
should talk to James Cantor.
I will.
He's delightful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he is
So
actually.
he's
You're
a
right.
sexologist,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
he was looking at this because he was like, "Oh, look at that. The AP did a statement." And so he's looking at it, and then he's like, "What?" And he goes over and he checks the references, and because this is his field of expertise, he's like,
Mhm.
"Wait a second. I know that paper. That's not about kids. That's about adult men." And so once he knew that one of the references was wrong, his interest was piqued. And so he published a paper called Fact Checking the AAP. And he just
Awesome,
went through and
awesome.
just ripped that thing to shreds. He's like,
Awesome.
"This you can't take this seriously. It's not it, it says these things that aren't true, so how can you take it seriously?" And just he's like, "We've known for decades that the majority of kids desist with the onset of puberty and that the majority of them are gay.
That's
And
right.
so why would we do otherwise? You're transing away the gay, which is wrong, I think."
It's weird. Also, it's
Yeah.
homophobic. Secondly, isn't there no oversight in these organizations? They run them they're like it's like a party.
I
They're
think I think that it started out with people wanting to be on the right side of history and encountering this really enthusiastic young doctor, and then they I don't know, and then they got bamboozled, and at this point, I think it's sort of like the cover up is worse than the crime. I
Oh,
can't imagine that these
oh,
people haven't figured this out. I mean,
I
they're not
can't believe
dumb,
it.
right? If
No,
you're in leadership and you're looking at what's going on, you have to understand this, but at this
that's
point,
right.
they're like, "Well, if we backtrack on this, then" I do worry. I mean, I worry that the AAP might, it, you know, be the recipient of some big lawsuits
Oh gosh,
because
I have no doubt.
the Endocrine Society put out like a guideline in 2017,
Mhm,
and they were like describing how to do pediatric medical transition, but they were very clear. They're like, we have no idea how to figure out which kids you should be treating.
wow.
But if you find yourself with one of these unicorns, if you find yourself
Mhm,
a trans kid,
mhm,
then this is what you do. You give, this at blah, blah, blah.
mhm,
And they had, they did look at the literature
mhm,
and they did show like the strength of their recommendations or the
mhm.
strength of the evidence for the recommendations, but they use these weird little circles with plus signs on them. They look like aspirins. And so if there was one filled in and three not, then that's like low quality. That's like this is just as likely to be wrong as right.
Uh-huh.
In fact, it's more likely to be wrong. And then
Wow.
two was like I think one is very low quality, two is low quality,
Uh-huh.
three is medium quality, and four is high quality. None of them had high quality
Huh.
evidence. The
Wow.
the vast majority of statements all had, like, low and very low
Wow.
quality, and yet they made strong recommendations based on low quality evidence, which is just not
This
done,
is
at
where
least.
my mind I don't understand what's going
Yeah,
on because in medicine, these are very important things. I know
yeah,
that and how
yeah.
medicine works, and I feel like there's some sketchy stuff going on here that
There's some
people are
sketchy stuff.
it is so bizarre to me that the
Well, I
medical
mean, things
world
like this have happened before. The whole opioid epidemic,
okay,
that
right.
was very
Okay.
sketchy, and actually
Yeah.
that started when I was in medical school because I started
Okay.
medical I started medical school in the '80s.
Okay.
And I remember in the '80s, they were like, "Yes, pain is the 5th vital sign. You need to ask your patients about their pain level."
Oh,
Like, that
wow.
they told us it's so important, and so, like,
Oh,
their temperature, their heart rate, their blood pressure, and their
their
pain
pain.
level. You need to ask about pain. And a lot of it was pushed by
Fascinating.
Purdue, who were making OxyContin,
Yep.
and
Yep.
they were marketing OxyContin as an amazing outpatient pain medicine that is not addictive and you can take it twice a day. 'Cause
Wow.
everything else was 3 times a day, and
Yeah.
3 times a day is a pain in the butt. I don't know why twice a day is so much easier than 3 times a day, but it really is. When most of the pediatric antibiotics went from 3 times a day to twice a day, it was just like, oh, so much easier. It's just so
Right.
much easier. So they knew that that would be a marketing thing, like, they'd give them a leg up and get people to prescribe the brand name instead of the generic, and so they're like,
Right.
"OxyContin twice a day, it's awesome. Totally not addictive."
Oh
But
my
the thing
god.
is, it didn't last. It didn't last for 12 hours.
That's right.
And so the drug reps were going back to their bosses and they're like, "Hey, the doctors are telling us that this med is not lasting 12 hours." And and so the advice was tell the doctors to give a higher dose.
Oh,
And that's insane because you just got like a higher dose
wow.
and then you go down and then you feel the lack of it, right? It
That's
was like a
right.
machine for creating addiction,
That's right.
giving people high doses of a fast acting opioid,
That's right.
and then they don't have it, and then they need more, and then they're taking it 3 times a day, and then they're out before the end of the month, and then the doctor's like, "What's going on?" "But
My
we've been
god.
told that pain is the most important thing," and yeah, it got to be such a mess. It got to be such a mess. I remember when I was
Wow.
practicing in rural Wisconsin, there was a family practitioner. who got a reputation for being like a drug dispenser, and he was just I don't think he was a bad person. I think he was just a soft-hearted guy.
Sure.
And so if you went and saw him and gave him a sob story about your pain, then he wrote you for the pain meds. And
Well,
he
right,
wasn't
that was his
really
intention. So
Yeah,
do you see a sort of overlap with the
I
the
do.
the
I
the
think that most of the
pediatrics?
I don't think the
Yeah,
gender doctors, like the pediatricians like me that are
yeah,
doing gender medicine, I don't think they're
yeah.
getting rich, you
No,
know?
I
I
don't
mean,
think
that
so.
surgeon might, right? Surgeons get rich forever.
Surgeons, I mean, come on, they're
Surgeons, so
pumping out 2 and 3 a day. That's a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
money.
So the surgeons may have a financial, but
No, but pediatricians
every time I've talked to a gender doctor, it's really obvious that they see themselves as life-saving heroes.
interesting.
They have drank the Kool-Aid. We
That's
talked
right.
about this right at the beginning, right? That,
Yep,
like, there's
yep,
no evidence that this is life-saving care,
yep.
but they really, really think that they are engaging in life-saving care, and that if it
Wow.
wasn't for them, these poor kids would just be miserable or
That's
dead
right. That's
or
right.
one and then the other. Yeah,
Yeah, I do believe that. I
and that's where a lot of and it's kind of a religion.
yeah, I do believe that too.
It's
Yeah.
the gender is sort of like a soul, and, there's these catechisms like trans women are women,
Oh god.
trans men are men,
I can't
non-binary
handle
people
it.
are valid,
Non-binary people are valid.
are
Like,
valid.
who cares? Get a job and, like, move forward and get a career,
Yeah,
and your
yeah,
life
we're
will be amazing.
yes.
Instead, everything is focused on our gender now and our
Mhm.
genitals and our
Yeah,
presentation.
yeah.
And that
I went to college in the '80s, the early '80s,
mhm,
and I had a gay friend, and he would complain about, other young gay men who were like their entire life was being gay.
that's right.
Like,
Yep,
that was just their whole life was
yep,
just, like, being gay, going to the club,
yep,
poppers, blah, 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 blah,
totally.
and he was getting his degree, and then he worked this way, and then he
Yep,
ended up and he's doing really well now, you know,
good for him.
um,
But it's the same with
but
the trans, it's g
it's
with
the
the young
same kind
people.
of
I
a
want,
thing.
"Yay, we're
You get
trans,"
wrapped
or
up in identity, and it's like,
that's
yeah,
right.
identity's interesting, but it's not the rest of your life.
Gosh, especially with something that is drastic as trans, it's not gay is different. You're it's a
Yeah.
completely different space. We're changing our this y idea, but so before we go here, I
Mhm,
really appreciate your time, doctor. It means so much to me. But I wanna ask you this one question.
mhm.
Are I hear that puberty blockers are reversible and they're not damaging.
Right.
What do you say to that?
I say that we have no solid data on whether that's true, and I've heard anecdotal reports that it is definitely not true. I mean,
Okay.
it's worth saying, if I haven't said it already, that
Yeah.
Finland, Sweden, Norway, England, Denmark, France are all concerned about this and pulling away and saying that psychological care should come before medicalization of kids with gender dysphoria.
Mhm.
And in Sweden, one of the things that turned it around was they had sort of a investigative journalism TV show,
Mhm.
and they had a multi-episode documentary on the
Mhm.
pediatric transition, and there was a kid that they called Leo, who was put on puberty blockers, and
Mhm.
I think was on them for more than 2 years, and ended up with just such a soft spine that there were compression fractures in the spine.
Oh,
And the kid didn't complain until they were bad and
mhm.
is going to be in pain
Mhm.
for the rest of their life. Like, it's not a thing that you can fix. And so that scandal led to Sweden taking another look at the data. So
Wow.
that was puberty blockers, spinal fractures. There was the kid I just mentioned who had 4
Yep.
fractured bones
Yep.
in the 4 years they were using the puberty blockers, and then
Yep.
also the whole thing about blocking your development of attraction to other
Oh,
humans.
gosh.
So yeah, no, I don't think they should be used. I don't think I mean, that was
Wow.
one of the red flags for me when I was just first looking into this. Like, I referred somebody, I thought they'd be, like, filtered out, and they weren't.
Mhm.
And then I'm asking questions, and everybody from the endocrinologist at OHSU to this
Mhm.
trans woman that runs, like, a youth group for kids was telling me that 99 plus % of kids put on puberty blockers go on to doing, the rest of it, the cross-sex hormones and the
Right.
surgeries and all that, and they'd be like, "See?
Wow.
Obviously, the kids, they know, right? Because 99%." And I'm like, "No, that's not what that means at all. If 99% of 99% of 12-year-olds can't hold on to what they're gonna be for Halloween in 3 months. So, no. No, I
No,
do not if 99% are going on to the rest of it, that means it's not a harmless pause.
that's
That
right.
means this is an active intervention that you're doing. It is not time to think,
Excellent.
the name of Hannah
Excellent.
Barnes' book. It is an active intervention that is concretizing what could have been a temporary identification.
Wow. Wow, that is so powerful what you just said, and so many people need to hear that because they don't understand. When they keep saying they're reversible, they're not reversible. You're blocking puberty. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, how can
I
you
mean,
say uh,
if you have a 5-year-old girl who's developing,
different,
hair and all that, and then you
different.
block it for a couple of years,
Yep,
but then she goes on and she has puberty at the same time as her classmates or a little earlier, that's reversible, but, bodies aren't endlessly malleable.
that's right.
If we block
That's right.
someone's puberty until they're 22, are they just gonna pick it up? I don't think so.
I don't think
But
so.
we don't know. There's so much that we don't know. We're just
That's
running
right.
blind.
And whose
Yeah,
kids are these that we're using on some level? This is kind of an experiment on some level, and I
it
think
is
it's
an
just
experiment
shocking. Thank you.
on multiple levels, and
Thank you.
and parents are being bullied into it, some of them, and some of them are just gravitating towards it because of their own social contagion. I think for some of the parents,
Wow,
it's their own social contagion.
I agree. Yes.
Um,
I do agree with
yeah.
that from what I've seen. Totally. Wow. Well, thanks, doctor. You're so amazing. And I'm gonna put all whatever, I know your Twitter. I watch you on Twitter. So if I can put that
Uh-huh.
down below, people want to
Oh, sure.
contact you because I'm sure a lot of parents will want to contact you
Right.
on some level. And you're just an amazing, beautiful human. Thanks for caring about us. It means so much to me. It really I feel that you care about the future of trans, and the future right now is scary to me as an older
It is
person in this
scary.
community. It's
It's scary.
scary. And
Especially the backlash that's likely to happen because of all this
oh my
overreach.
god, that's right. It's gonna affect
Yeah.
people like me, totally. I mean, luckily, I'm older enough to be able to handle it,
Right,
but
you're
it'll
yeah,
affect real, actual transsexual people, and it's not okay. So,
yeah.
with that, everybody, thanks so much. Thanks for watching. Send Dr. Julia a lot of love, please, and,
Right.
I'll see you guys on
Segum.org.
Sagem dot I'll put
SEGM.
all of it in the description. I mean, there's so many
Okay,
great organizations, and I'll
true.
definitely put that there too. So, thanks so
Okay.
much, Dr. Julia, and I'll,
Alright.
talk to you later. Thanks, everybody. See you later.